Kabbalistic treatise on the topic of creation, something from nothing. Speaking about creation, something from nothing, its divine source, and how the highest is manifest in the lowest. Hence, the physical earth having the creative power to generate plant life from nothing, the power of physical mitzvot. So, in a way, we see that the power of physical mitzvot is similar to that power of creating something from nothing. But that power is also invested in the soil. Because think about what happens: you take a seed, you plant it, it rots, disintegrates, and then something comes out. Now it's amazing that even the flavor of the fruits are embedded in that seed. The flavor that one day will grow, fruits will grow on that tree, the type of taste that you will have will be similar, will be already in that seed. He writes that we have that power, or at least a similar power of creating something from nothing in the
physical,
in the plant, in the physical earth. You have it. It's divine source, and how the highest is manifest in the lowest. Hence, the physical earth, which is seemingly the lowest, is manifested in the highest. What is the highest? The highest is creating something from nothing. What is the lowest? Is earth. Everybody steps on it, but still, it has within it the power to create something from nothing. Right? So, and then you go to Wednesday. It says, so we'll read the takeaway from yesterday was Kabbalah 101. Kelim, vessels, is to be understood in its practical sense, a vessel to capture and anchor a spiritual light, an energy of God into a concrete characteristic. So the definition of the light happens due to the kli, to the vessel. Okay, so the vessel contains the light. It, in a way, limits it. While the divine attribute of Chokhmah, intellect, is comprised of oros and kelim, lights and vessels, its expression as intellect is primarily a function of the vessel. So really the light of Chokhmah itself is not yet an expression of wisdom. The actual wisdom is when the light entered the kli. Okay? So before it entered the kli, it's something so abstract that I can't even call it Chokhmah.
the potential.
Potential?
Yeah. But when is it Chokhmah? When it enters the kli. So in today's lesson, the created entity does not sense its source. As that's the concealment. We are a created entity. We don't sense the source. If we would sense the source, we would behave differently.
But don't we as Jews
The world
sense it?
would, obviously, some level, subconsciously, we meditate, but naturally, most people don't sense the source.
Like I know when I have a
It's
spirit of
concealed.
folly, but I
Right.
know that I should always try to stay focused on the source.
No, what you should try to do, everybody knows, what we all try ought to do and obligated to do, and it's fine, but naturally we're created in such a way that we don't see the source. That's what he means. The created entity does not sense its source, as is usually the case with a cause-effect relationship, which is interesting. If you think about cause-effect relationship, is that the effect is receiving from the cause. So the effect should somewhat recognize the cause, the giver. But in reality, it doesn't happen. The cause is giving, right?
Mm-hmm.
The cause is giving the effect, and the effect is ignoring the cause.
Doesn't know it's there.
Well, it doesn't seem fair, right?
Doesn't even know it's there in some cases.
Only with the aspect
But
of holiness.
It doesn't seem fair at all. It's like a child receives from his father, then he completely denies his existence, right? It's as if he's heir. He tells you, "You're not my father," but you receive from him constantly. But so, where the latter precedes the former. So, in other words, the cause always knows the effect. Who is he giving to? But it's not always. There's no reciprocation all the time. Hence, its sense of independent and the term something from nothing. So where do you have a sense of independence? When you forget the source. If I would constantly remember the source, then it's not I know who is giving it. What is, remember, we said nothing doesn't mean in literally nothing. It means incomprehensible. So I just don't understand it. It's a level that's beyond you. So in a way, the fact that there is a creation, something from nothing, I can feel independent. I don't feel dependent because that I don't see the source. If we would see the source, we would never feel independent. We would constantly live with the feeling that we are dependent on Hashem every single moment. The reason why we can go by, people can go by years without maybe davening, without thanking Hashem, is because that they don't feel the source. They feel independent due to the concealment of the giver.
We're dependent of Hashem, but independent from other human beings.
We're all connected, though.
But in reality, it's the opposite.
Right.
People are dependent. They put the dependency
on
human
everyone else,
beings.
not Hashem.
Yeah, because the source is hidden.
And they feel independent from Hashem.
But I know
in
what
a
you
way,
mean.
Hashem created that reality.
You're good. You're a holy guy.
The point is that Hashem created that reality that we should feel independent. But at the same time, we work on ourselves to recognize Hashem, despite the sense of free choice and we can do whatever we want at any given time. We can make our choices all the time. Let's see. So the coming about of substantiality ex nihilo yesh me'ayin is the holy tongue called Beriah. So meaning the concept of yesh me'ayin is in Beriah, in the world of creation. Meaning that in the world of emanation, it's not even yesh me'ayin. It's the oneness in the world of Atzilus, in the world of emanation, is so much loftier that we didn't give it yet the term yesh me'ayin, something from nothing. Something from nothing is in the world of creation. Something was created from the incomprehensible. I apologize, today's Kabbalistic stuff.
Man, I love the Kabbalistic stuff. That's all I'm about.
That's why you start off in depth.
Before I met you, that's what I was doing, but I didn't really understand it as well as I did over the last 5 years learning Tanya. So.
Okay, so the Alter Rebbe now goes on to anticipate a quarry. In point of fact, created substance is also truly nullified to godliness. Okay, the created. Truly, we are all nullified to Hashem. Whether we like it or not, whether we know it or don't know it, truly nullified to Him. For all is before Him as naught. Obviously, from Hashem, everything is insignificant from His perspective. Why then do we say that creation ex nihilo cannot result from ilah and alul? Ilah and alul is cause and effect. Now, yesh me'ayin is completely different than ilah and alul. Yesh me'ayin is ex nihilo, something from nothing. And ilah and alul is cause and effect. So, in order for the alul to receive from the ilah, the cause to receive, the effect to receive from the cause, it has to have some kind of relationship between the two. Meaning, the people you're giving to, they have certain relationship to you. Connection, closeness, relationship relative to you, whatever it is. And you can find it also in certain hierarchy in the world, that people who are like the club of Bill Gates is not everyone in that club, meaning his close friends are in that level, right? That they are engaging with him. So, and each one, so in order, the fact that Mr. Gates is involved with, maybe I should use a different example, and these days
a regular guy
is a dirty name.
No, just say a regular guy. It's all good.
No, I'm trying to make a point that
like 100 million.
No, I'm trying to make a point that the very the people that are up there, at least on the material world,
right,
those who receive the checks from them, they're also on that level. They're maybe not exactly the same, but they have to be on that level to have. So meaning as high as he is, but the people that are in his entourage or in his club, let's call it, they have some kind of connection with him. That's why they're receiving from him. So that if let's say we call level number 100 the highest level, and level number 99 is receiving from 100, meaning the 99 has closeness to 100, not only in proximity, but also close to 100 in quality,
they are both
something in common.
They are both
in common, in
givers.
exaltance. So they're both on the same in a similar page. But the point is, when it comes to something from nothing, there is no comparison between one and the other. Since like one is like a billion years higher than the effect, than the created. Otherwise, say, okay, Hashem created us something from nothing. So that means that we have some kind of closeness to him, and therefore he creates. Says no, something from nothing means that everything is naught, insignificant. The level of the incomprehensible level of the ayin that we're talking about is so much. It's so much further than the actual yesh that receives it. On the Ilayin Alul, when you hear the word Ilayin Alul, cause and effect, it's like a chain. So the higher chain gives the lower chain, but they have to be closer to one another. They have to somewhat recognize one another and have a relationship. So he writes, the created substance would be nullified to its source when it's in truth, even as the substance exists as a yesh, created ex nihilo, it is in any event nullified to the divine source that is responsible for its creation, and that continuously, and that's the point that we spoke about a couple of days ago, that continuously vests itself within it to constantly create it new. So ex nihilo means not only that I'm giving you, but constantly giving you and recreating you all the time. Yesh Anivo is the actual created being, is keloi, meaning is always nullified to Hashem. And although created substance is also as naught before him, for everything including the created yesh is as naught before Hashem. That is, it is essentially non-existent, not only in relation to God's essence, which utterly transcends worlds and creation, but also within it, within creation, in relation to the energy and light flows into it. So think about the light that flows into us. It's array that is condensed so much that it could feed such physical human beings. So he's telling us that the distance between the giver and the taker are so far, it's such a great distance, even though we're talking about the contracted light that creates something physical, the condensed light that created something physical. So that's what he meant by akoyach va'era shofea bo, in relation to the energy and light that flows into it, flows into the actual kli, and that light has to be condensed. It had to be reduced in order to feed physical. Right. But even though it's compressed so much, it is so beyond and far away from the actual object or entity or human being that it created. This force and light deriving from the kelim, from the vessels of the 10 sfirot of Atzilut. Now it tells us how the degradation actually takes place. So it's a light that is within the vessels of Atzilut. In the world of emanation, you have 10 levels. So it starts from Chokhmah of Atzilut, then it goes all the way down to Malchut of Atzilut, then it jumps to the next world, Chokhmah, wisdom within the world of Bria, the world of creation. It goes through all the 10 levels within the world of creation. And then it jumps to the world of formation, and then again 10 levels, and then it comes down to 10 levels within the world of Asiya. and then it travels down again 10 levels, but each level is comprised of all 10, so it's really, I'm just making the long story short.
Exponential.
When it comes within to Asiya within Asiya, and ultimately gives to a human being. That's really why it says there's a Maimon of Dr. Ebba that speaks about davening, and when we create a flow that through davening. So he explains over there that many times there is a energy that needs to come down, but as it travels down, it gets blocked through so many stops on the way. And he speaks over there about the blessing of the Kohanim that is able to sometimes bypass all the different obstacles and hurdles on the way to come directly to the person. Otherwise, imagine everyone would play and boom, it would happen right away. The reason why it doesn't happen is because of all the travelings that it has to do.
Some days are better than others. I'm praying.
No, maybe some days. Let's say you have a good day. It could be that it's a response from a prayer that you did a year ago. You don't know.
No problem.
That's the tricky part of it. You can't say, oh, because today I did this and this, and therefore I had that. Maybe 2 months ago, and now you're being responded.
Finally made it all the way down.
Well, it only took Hashem 10 years to. Thank you.
No, you
10
said
years.
it 10 years ago.
I've been asking for a lot of stuff. So
It could be that the Kli wasn't ready for it. That's the whole idea. The vessel is not ready for it, so therefore it has to go. But anyhow, they get the point.
Your beard looks good, by the way.
So that's why he says, from the kelim of the 10 sefirot of Atzilus, B'riyat, Tzira, Siyah, into which the kav of the infinite Ein Sof light radiates. Though we are speaking only of the creative force, the kelim of the 10 sefirot, vessels within the 10 sefirot that animates created beings, this too may be termed before him, lifnei Hashem, before him, since within these kelim is found the radiance of the Ein Sof light. The kelim itself, they have within them the Ein Sof light. Uchaziv Hashemesh b'shemesh, and thus the degree of nullification of created beings is like of a sun ray, while still in its source within the sun. So if we think about the sun and the rays of the sun, as the ray of the sun would be a manifestation of the sun itself, right? What happens if we can tell the ray of the sun, imagine you can tell the ray of the sun, I want you not to go back to your source, right? Let's say what happens at night, assuming that in nighttime the rays of the sun go back to their source, okay? So at that point, the ray and the actual sun are one with each other, right? He says, "Uchaziv Hashemesh b'shemesh," like that of a sun ray while still in its source within the sun, while they are still in the orb of the sun. Sun rays are essentially non-existent. They're there in the sun itself. They contribute no independently identifiable illumination. They're not adding anything. It's like I'm going to take a candle and I'm going to add it to a big flame of fire. It's not adding anything. It's there, but it's not doing anything. Right? It's just an extra 0.000 of light. It's like taking a candle in the middle of the day. It's not doing anything. Nothing exists there but their source, the orb of the sun, the luminary from which they derive. This concept was already discussed in Likutei Amorim in the earlier part of the Tanya.
So nothing exists until it's created. That's something from nothing. It came from Hashem.
Right.
So nothing exists outside of him.
Right, but on a deeper Kabbalistic level, let's say as an independent person, until you step out and move forward in something away from the crowd, you're not seen anyway. So you're just nullified to everything else. It's kind of a catch-22. But in the aspect of the light of the sun, you don't notice it.
The ray is part of the sun.
Thousands of black hats.
When it's in the sun, so nothing exists until Hashem. So that's why he has to constantly recreate over and over.
In a way, he has to command the ray to do its thing. Right?
Right.
But the nullification of the ray is noticeable when the ray is within the sun. when the ray leaves the sun to do its job, seemingly it's independent,
That's it.
right?
But it's not.
But it's not.
Still connected.
Yeah, obviously,
Listeners.
because the only power that the ray has is from the sun. So he's connecting it to the power of Ein Sof. This is an analogy to the power of Ein Sof. That although it was degraded so much to such level that it gives a physical human being, but in essence, it's really connected one, and therefore, from that perspective of that power, everything is so insignificant, because I give this example many times. Imagine you can create things with your speech. So you say, let it be a palace, and a palace is immediately being created or appears in front of your eyes. What kind of importance would you have for that, or significance in your eyes? You're saying, I can create a 1,000 of them every day.
Every second.
Every
time
second.
you say it,
Yeah. So now imagine the godly power, 1 billion times more.
Infinitely more.
Right, infinitely more. Omar Vayei, he said, and it came into being, right? And you have a Hashem creating things with thought. So it's even tremendously, it's above even our
Pay grade.
It's incomprehensible.
Right.
Yeah.
I can't think that.
That's the Ein. That's why we call it Ein. So in light of the above, how can we possibly say that if creation were to result from Ila and Alul, cause and effect, created beings would not exist in a manner of Yesh, but would be nullified to their source? Meaning that if Hashem would have created us, Yesh, Ila and Alul, cause and effect, maybe we would be more connected, because we would feel, we would have some kind of relationship to the giver, right? We are the takers, cause and the effect. So the effect would have some kind of connection with the cause. If Hashem would have created us, Eli and Alul, cause and effect. Instead, He created a Yesh Me'ayin, something out of nothing. And therefore we feel independent, and that independency is the concealment. So it says, when in truth, even after they were created ex nihilo, they're still truly nullified within their souls, like the sun rays within the sun. Alter Rebbe answers, however, this is only before him. As seen from the heavenly perspective, Das Elyon, which is godly knowledge, from which God knows creation, His knowledge perceiving from above, netherward. But the way we are looking at things, but as seen from the earthbound perspective, Das Tachton, we have Das Elyon, godly knowledge, and Das Tachton is it's actually a very common expression. Then when a rabbi wants to give his opinion on things, he says, Das Tachton, in the way I understand it, it would be, meaning I don't have a source for it, but the way I perceive it, it would be, that should be the halacha, or that should be the direction, and so on. So Das Tachton. So how do we perceive it? But as seen from the earthbound perspective, Das Tachton, of created beings, with a knowledge that perceives from below upward, the way we are understanding, created Yesh is an altogether separate thing in this knowledge and apprehension from below. So that's, from our perspective, we are separate. Any way you want to sugarcoat it, but from our perspective, we feel
separate.
But the reality is we're not.
But the reality, that's the Das Elyon. That's the above knowledge. Everything is nullified, and you can pull the plug on anyone at any given time, and even on the world, God forbid. But He pulls the plug to vivify the world, to give it life, constantly. He holds the plug up. As a created being perceives itself to be altogether separate and apart from the source that creates it, not recognizing its ongoing dependence on it. We don't recognize the ongoing dependence, how we are constantly dependent on Hashem. So imagine if people would really be aware of their dependency, they would never sin. Never sin. It's like, imagine there's someone that stand next to you and give you dollars all day long. Would you cut off his hand? It's right.
Well,
so if we would be really aware how we are dependent on Hashem, every single split of a second He gives us life, we'd never sin. Impossible to sin. That's why there is a understanding, or at least subconsciously, people feel independent.
Independence is the curtain that kind of.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the wall.
But there's positivity to it, because then we have free choice that enables us to really serve Hashem wholeheartedly and serve Hashem with
Versus just for
with
the
our
dollars.
initiative. Yeah, that it comes from us. Though aware that it came into being by virtue of godly source, we are aware that it came through a godly source. It nevertheless considers its own existence to be yesh, to be being, to be a yesh, to be a being, and its godly source, ein, we are considering, but really it's the opposite. Something that is dependent is really nothingness, because it's what type of validity does it have if it's dependent on other things, right? Something that is dependent does not have a true existence. We're learning Leilun Nishmat, the Charni about Lippman, and also we learn Leilun Nishmas. Name is Yaakov Ben Hirsch.
They put another name in? Leah Bat Riva.
Leah too.
Yeah.
Shama Shalem Leah and for Shalem to our friend Daniel Ben Simcha. No those in it for Shalem. So the thing is, we said yesh me'ayin, right? The world has created something from nothing. But the truth is that something that is a true yesh, a true existence, is something that is not dependent on anything. If something is independent, I can call it yesh. Like this thing is seemingly independent, right? But truly, it's dependent on godly power. It keeps all the atoms that are in it together and all running, and somehow the bond it's still connected. But so this is really ein, nothingness, and the godliness that gives life, which is truly independent, that's the yesh. So it's the opposite.
It's opposite than what it seems.
We're calling yesh ma'ayin, that we are the yesh, and the ayin is somewhere above. I can understand. But if you think about the concept of independent and dependent, then since we are so dependent, we are the true ayin, the nothingness, and the power that gives us life is the real yesh. I said many times, the great tzaddikim, they saw the world that way. In their glasses, that's how they perceive the world. The world is ein. Everything over here that we see is facade. And the real yesh is godliness. So how did they conduct themselves in the world? It says, if not for Bereshis Bo'alekim, if not for the book of Genesis that says Hashem created the world, they wouldn't believe that the world exists, even though you'd think, well, they see it in front of their eyes. No, because to them, from their perspective, what they're seeing nothingness. Because whatever they see is dependent. He said this is dependent on God and this is dependent on God. So what validity does it have? It's always dependent. So the true yesh is something that is independent. Comprendo?
So you see it both ways.
Yeah.
Either way.
That's why the Gemara says that when one a tzaddik had a clinical death, what we call today a clinical death. He died and they were about to bury him and he got up. So they said, what did you see? So he said, I saw a topsy-turvy world. He said, what you guys are considered important, we are considered not important. If we are considered important, what is important from From a godly perspective, you guys are considering it as nothingness, as stupidity, as waste of time. That's what the concept of yesh enayin and yesh enayin in from das elyon and das tachton, the godly knowledge and the human understanding. For the force that creates it and continuously flows into it is not understood by created being at all. We can never fathom the godly power that is infused in us. The created being therefore calls its source Ein, since it does not exist in its world of comprehension. That's why we call it Ein. It doesn't exist. I don't understand it. Famous joke about the Russian teacher who told the students at the time of Stalin that everything we see we believe, and whatever we don't see we don't believe. So we don't see God, therefore he doesn't exist. So a Jewish student picks up his hand and he says, "We also don't see your brain. That means you're stupid. We can't see it, right? If we don't see it, it doesn't exist."
There are a lot of people who feel that way. They go, prove God exists, otherwise why should I believe him?
Right.
Prove that he exists. There's a lot of people in the world who feel that way.
Yeah.
Prove that he exists.
They said there's no atheist in the foxholes,
No,
right?
that's true. Right.
Why? Because in the time of danger, the true core of a person is being revealed.
Right.
So, we have no one to rely on, Ella, only on our Father in heaven.
So that's that independence where they say, "Hey, I don't see."
They
it, so I'm not
surrender.
gonna do this."
So the surrendering comes only when.
They cut right when they need right.
Until they
But the
call
reason
it-
why they turned to him at the time of where did they get it? If you think, well, a guy his whole life was atheist, suddenly the bullets are flying, and he started and he
It's that
turns to Hashem. Why he turns to Hashem? Why didn't he turn to some other? Why? Because it's there. It's
inside.
especially with Jews, where it says "Ma'aminim bnei ma'aminim," they're believers, the sons of believers. So another reason for its calling the source Ein. Why do we call the source Ein? Because really we said the source is the real Yesh, is the real existence. As the Alter Rebbe now continues, lies in the fact that he exists in an entirely different manner. There being no similarity between created and creator. So the reason why it's called Ein, because it exists in an entirely different manner. So that's also the incomprehensible part of it, that it doesn't exist in the way we can that we can in any way understand it. Moreover, there is no approximation whatsoever from one to another, from the Yesh to the Ein. Neither does the relation between them partially or minimally resemble the approximation between an effect and its cause, Ilah. So I mentioned it before, the Alul, the cause, knows and has some apprehension of its Ilah, of the effect. Since the Ilah, the cause, does exist in the world of comprehension, the Alul, the effect, the latter, is affected by the comprehension of its Ilah. And becomes nullified in relation to it, to the Ilah, through this knowledge and apprehension. A Yesh, by contrast, has absolutely no apprehension of the Ein that is responsible for its creation. That's, remember we said the difference between the cause and effect and the something from nothing is that one has some kind of understanding of its creator, the Alul, the cause, but when it comes to Yesh and Ein, there's no comparison whatsoever. Even with respect, when talking about cause and effect, with respect to their intrinsic nature and essence, there is not such a great distinction between the Ilah and Alul, except that one is cause and the other is effect. So meaning they have a lot of common denominators between the two. They're very close to one another. The Ilah and Alul of intellect and emotion serve as a perfect example. Essentially, emotion is already to be found in its source as emotion within intellect. Midot shebaseichel, meaning even intellect itself has midot already in it. Has emotive attributes. Within intellect there is also emotive attributes. There's very few people that have intellect, cold intellect without any sense of emotion in there. And even before it exists alone as a distinct entity, it already existed in the source. Meaning if someone have, for example, joy, he is expressing joy, it's because that he understood that something positive just happened. So it went through his mind, he perceived it, and then he gets excited. So he tells you that the fact that he gets excited means that already within the intellect there was already an element of joy. The element of chesed, of kindness, is already existing there. But though emotion within intellect exists in a different manner from pure emotion, they're not similar to one another. The emotion that you have within the intellect and the emotion by itself, the independent emotion, are very different. They are in essence, but in essence they are the same. Yet this distinction neither partially nor minimally resembles the distinction between the essence of a created substance and the essence of the energy and light that flows into it to create from Ayin to Yesh. Ayin and Yesh are inherently and entirely different. The Ayin does not exist at all in the manner that the Yesh does. This is why creation is called precisely Yesh Ma'ayin ex nihilo, something out of nothing. For although even the created Yesh is aware that everything derives from you, we say everything comes from Hashem, people repeat it many times, it nevertheless calls its source, we're still calling the source Ayin. For the above mentioned reasons, the source does not exist, and we write in parentheses, the source does not exist, meaning we don't see the source, in the limited world of the creature's comprehension, and it does not exist in the same manner as the Yesh. It's not the same form, same level, same energy, everything is different. In other words, there is no comparison between the outcome and the energy that created that outcome. The created and the creator have no comparison whatsoever. And that's another reason why it does not exist in our perspective. So the takeaway from today's Tanya, Kabbalah 101, Kav is the straight line. It says about the light of the Kav that when Hashem created the world initially, the Goyim calls it the Big Bang. But there's actually something big that did happen in the creation of the world, is that Hashem removed, it says that he silek hatzida, he moved to the side the energy that was pervading the space at that time, and then created the Eirakav. Eirakav in Kabbalah and Hasidus it mentioned a lot, which is a energy that is called the line. Kav is the line, you're making a line. It's meaning it's a very limited, contracted energy. So he writes, Kav, in parentheses line, is the initial infinite expression, the beginning. After he removed the infinite light, he replaced it because it still exists, but he gave us, for the creation, he created the Hakav, the line. Is the initial infinite expression of the energy of God, often synonymous with the Or Ein Sof. So even Or Ein Sof is referred to as the Kav. This energy is somewhat of transitional energy, as it is called a line, which represents some sort of downgrade, which will allow for this light and energy to eventually become compatible with each of the worlds. But it is an energy that flows from the infinite essence of God and is infinite energy by nature. So even though we call it a kav, it's really Ein Sof.
It's, like,
Wochen tief.
it's very vast. It's not just a straight line.